This is not your space, step away. What followed was a quiet moment that unraveled status, power, and every assumption in the room. Stay with us. What begins with rejection transforms into a connection so human it dismantles every wall they built to keep her out. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Have you ever rewritten your own story? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Black Stories Untold with Love, and ring that notification bell for more heartwarming stories that celebrate strength. Miles Williams learned early how to make the world obey him. By 42, he had mastered it. Glass towers rose at the sound of his approval. Markets bent. Boardrooms went silent when he entered. His name moved quietly through corridors of power like a promise or a warning, depending on who heard it. From the outside, his life looked flawless, controlled, impressive, untouchable. Inside, it was quiet in a way that echoed. Every morning began the same. The estate woke before he did, lights warming marble halls, coffee prepared to his exact preference, schedules aligned to the minute. Routine was his shield, precision his armor. Nothing unexpected was allowed close enough to hurt him. Not anymore. He dressed in tailored suits that fit his broad frame perfectly, dark hair always neat, his face composed in a way magazines loved. Miles was handsome in a way that felt deliberate. Strong jaw, steady eyes, the kind of man people trusted without knowing why. They assumed confidence meant peace. They were wrong. The silence followed him everywhere, even here, in the sprawling home overlooking the city. It lived in the wide spaces between rooms, in the halls designed to impress guests who rarely stayed long. It settled into his chest when the day slowed and there was nothing left to manage. The only place that silence changed was in the room at the end of the east wing. Noah's room was softer, warmer. The light filtered through sheer curtains, landing gently on shelves filled with carefully chosen toys and books that had never been read aloud. Noah sat on the floor near the window, legs tucked beneath him, fingers moving slowly over the edge of a wooden block. His dark curls caught the sunlight. His expression was distant, inward, as if he lived half a world away. Miles watched him from the doorway. Noah did not speak. He did not look up when his father entered. Doctors had explained it in careful language, diagnoses wrapped in empathy and statistics. Miles had listened, nodded, paid for every specialist available. Money solved problems. It always had. But it had never taught his son how to meet his eyes. Miles loved Noah fiercely, quietly. He ensured the best care, the best therapists, the safest environment. He rearranged his empire so his son would never lack anything. Yet when it came to the small human moments, the unpredictable ones, he froze. Touch felt fragile. Emotion felt dangerous. He had lost too much already to risk losing again. Years earlier, grief had carved something out of him and left the edges raw. He had survived by sealing himself shut. Noah shifted slightly, humming under his breath, lost in his own rhythm. Miles felt the familiar ache rise in his chest, the one that came when he realized how close his son was and how far away he felt. There were moments when Miles wondered if Noah sensed his fear, if the distance between them was something learned rather than inevitable. Miles turned away before the ache could deepen. Outside, the city moved. People hurried, restaurants filled, music played. Life continued in ways that did not require him to participate. Miles Williams owned more than most men could imagine, yet the one thing he wanted most remained just beyond his reach: connection. And somewhere far from his world of steel and silence, a woman he had never met was about to step into his life without knowing she would undo everything he thought was unbreakable. Violet Lee learned how to read a room before she ever learned how to escape one. She could feel tension before it spoke. She could sense grief hiding behind polished smiles. It was a skill earned in spaces where she had to stay soft without becoming small, where survival depended on noticing what others ignored. The restaurant glowed in the evenings. Soft lighting brushed against marble tables and polished glass. Music moved low and slow through the air, designed to soothe people who arrived already tired of carrying importance. Violet worked the floor with ease. Her posture was relaxed, her movements unhurried. She wore her uniform like it belonged to her, not like something she was confined by. She was beautiful in a way that did not ask for permission. Her skin held warmth even under cool lights. Her eyes were steady and expressive, the kind that listened even when she was not speaking. People often noticed her smile first. It was not practiced or automatic. It arrived when it meant something and stayed when it was needed. Violet had learned early that bitterness was heavy. She chose not to carry it. She had known struggle, long shifts, missed chances, the quiet exhaustion of being underestimated. She'd known rooms where her presence was invisible and others where it felt too visible, yet none of it hardened her. It sharpened her empathy instead. She learned how to offer kindness without losing herself inside it. When Miles Williams entered the restaurant for the first time, Violet noticed him immediately. Not because of his wealth or his reputation. She noticed the way he moved, controlled, careful, as if the world might crack if he stepped wrong. He was handsome in a way that suggested discipline rather than ease. His eyes scanned the room before he sat, not searching for comfort but for threats. He always chose the same table, near the window, slightly removed. Violet respected that instinct. She brought his order exactly as requested without comment. No flattery, no forced warmth, just quiet attentiveness. Something in her understood that he did not want to be managed. He wanted to be left intact. Over time, she noticed more. The pauses before he spoke. The way his gaze drifted when laughter rose nearby. The way he stiffened when children passed the table. There was something carefully locked inside him. Violet did not try to open it. She simply allowed space around it. Her presence softened the room without demanding attention. Other servers rushed. Violet flowed. She noticed the couple arguing quietly in the corner and adjusted her timing. She noticed the elderly woman dining alone and lingered just long enough to offer connection without pity. She noticed the man at table 9 whose hands trembled when he lifted his glass and placed it closer to steady him. Light did not announce itself. It simply showed up. Violet carried that light with her. Not as a performance, as a truth. It followed her from table to table, settling into heavy spaces and making them breathable. She did not know yet that one man in particular was watching her move through the room. Watching the way the weight inside him shifted when she passed. Watching because, for the first time in years, something in him felt seen without being touched. And Violet Lee kept moving, unaware that her quiet grace was already changing the shape of a life that believed itself finished. The night Miles brought Noah into the restaurant, the air felt heavier than usual. Even the lights seemed to dim in anticipation, soft amber pooling over white linen and polished glass. Miles hesitated at the entrance, his hand firm on the back of Noah's chair. His shoulders squared, as if bracing for impact. He had avoided places like this for years, public spaces where eyes lingered too long, where silence could turn sharp. Noah sat quietly, his small body rigid, his gaze unfocused as the noise washed over him. The low murmur of conversation, the clink of silverware, the swell of music drifting between tables. It all arrived at once, too much and nowhere to put it. His fingers curled inward. His breathing shortened. The world narrowed to a single point somewhere inside him. Miles felt it immediately. He guided the chair toward the familiar table near the window, the one he always chose. Safe, predictable, removed. He noticed the way nearby conversations faltered as they passed. Some diners stared openly, curiosity poorly disguised. Others looked away with hurried discomfort. Miles recognized both reactions. He had memorized them. They lived in his body like a second pulse. He sat, jaw tight, already preparing the apology he would offer himself when they left too soon. He told himself it was fine, that Noah would be more comfortable at home, that the risk was never worth it. His hand hovered near Noah's shoulder but did not land. Touch felt like a question he was afraid to ask. Noah rocked slightly now, a soft hum escaping his throat. Miles felt the familiar heat of shame rise. Not shame of his son. Never that. Shame of the world. Shame that love was not enough to shield Noah from it. Shame that he could buy silence in boardrooms but not here. Violet noticed before anyone else moved. She had been carrying a tray across the room when she saw them. She felt the shift in energy the way she always did, a tightening, a holding of breath. She saw Noah's hands curl inward and the way Miles leaned just a fraction closer without touching. She did not rush. She did not freeze. She adjusted her pace and set the tray down at a nearby station. She approached the table slowly, her movements unthreatening. She did not look at the other diners. She did not look at Miles first. She lowered herself to Noah's level, her knees bending until they met the floor. The room seemed to fall away around them. Violet's eyes were warm and steady, curious but not demanding. She offered a smile that carried no expectation, no instruction, just presence. She did not speak. She let the quiet settle between them like a shared secret. Noah stilled. His rocking slowed, his humming softened, his eyes flickered toward her face, then away, then back again. Violet remained exactly where she was, still, grounded, a calm point in the chaos. Miles watched, breath caught somewhere in his chest. No one had ever done this. No one had ever seen Noah before. Seeing the diagnosis. Violet did not flinch. She did not correct. She did not manage. She simply acknowledged him as a child sitting in front of her, deserving of space and time. The restaurant exhaled without realizing it. Conversations resumed at a lower pitch. The tension loosened its grip. Miles felt something unfamiliar crack open inside him. Not fear, not grief. Relief. The kind that arrives when you realize you're not alone in holding something fragile. At that table where silence had always lived, something else began to take root. A quiet understanding, a moment that did not ask to be fixed, only witnessed. The music began so softly it almost went unnoticed, a slow melody drifting from hidden speakers, gentle enough to feel like a suggestion rather than a command. It moved through the restaurant like a breath, settling into corners and between tables, easing the edges of conversations. Violet felt it before she heard it, the rhythm brushing against her ribs as she knelt beside Noah. She glanced up once, gauging the room, then back to him. Noah's fingers were still curled inward, his body taut, his eyes darting away from the noise he could not name. Violet did not speak. She never rushed moments like this. Instead, she extended her hands slowly, palms open, resting them just close enough to be seen, but not forced. She waited. Noah's gaze flickered. His attention snagged on the movement, on the warmth in her eyes, on the quiet certainty of her stillness. After a long pause that felt like the room holding its breath, his fingers brushed hers. Violet closed her hands gently around his. Not guiding, not pulling, just holding. Then she swayed. It was barely a movement at first. A subtle shift of weight from one knee to the other. A rhythm felt more than seen. She let the music do the work. letting it travel through her body and into the space between them. Noah's hands tightened slightly in hers. His shoulders dropped. The hum in his throat changed pitch, softening into something curious. Miles felt his heart stop. He watched from across the table, his body frozen, his mind scrambling to make sense of what he was seeing. Violet did not look at him. She did not ask permission. She trusted the moment more than fear. Noah began to sway with her, his movements tentative at first, then surer. His rocking found the rhythm. His breath slowed, and then it happened. Noah smiled. It was small, unpracticed, as if the muscles themselves were surprised. But it was unmistakable, a smile that reached his eyes and stayed there. A sound escaped him, something light and bright, a laugh shaped by discovery. The room seemed to tilt toward them. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations fell away. The clink of glass stopped. Every table turned toward the quiet miracle unfolding between a waitress and a child. The music continued, unaware of the gravity it now carried. Violet rose slowly, still holding Noah's hands, lifting him just enough to stand. She swayed again, her movements gentle and patient, allowing him to follow rather than forcing him to lead. Noah stepped closer. His feet moved. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but willingly, fully present in his body in a way Miles had never seen. Miles felt tears sting his eyes and did not stop them. He had spent years trying to unlock this part of his son through effort and expense, through plans and programs and experts. And here it was happening effortlessly in a restaurant he almost left, led by a woman who saw before she acted. The room remained silent, not out of discomfort, but reverence. Something sacred had taken shape. A reminder that humanity does not announce itself with power. It arrives quietly, unexpectedly, through kindness offered without agenda. Violet laughed softly when Noah stumbled and steadied him without comment. She met his joy with joy, his wonder with patience. The dance did not last long. It did not need to. It had already changed the shape of the room. When Violet finally lowered herself back to the floor and released his hands, Noah stayed standing for a moment, glowing with something new. Miles exhaled a breath he had been holding for years. That was the moment. The moment Miles Williams understood that everything he thought was unbreakable inside him was already breaking open. Not from force, but from love moving to music he had forgotten how to hear. Miles remained seated long after the music softened back into the background. The room had returned to its rhythm, but something inside him had not. His hands rested on the table, steady in appearance, yet unfamiliar to him now. He felt exposed in a way wealth had never allowed. The moment with Noah replayed in his mind with relentless clarity. The smile, the laughter, the way his son had stepped into the world without fear. There were numbers Miles could recite without effort. Net worth, growth, margins, acquisition dates. But there was no language for what he had just witnessed, no ledger for wonder, no strategy for grace. He had spent years believing that if he just tried harder or paid more or planned better, he could protect his son from the world. Violet had done something else entirely. She had invited the world to meet Noah where he stood. Miles looked at his son now. Noah sat quietly, his body relaxed in a way Miles had never seen outside their home. His fingers moved across the table edge with curiosity rather than retreat. There was stillness in him that felt earned, not forced. Miles swallowed hard. He stood and walked toward Violet before doubt could reclaim him. She was near the service station, folding napkins with care, her expression calm as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Miles stopped a few steps away. He felt suddenly unsure of where to place his hands, where to begin. No boardroom had ever made him feel this unprepared. He spoke her name carefully. Violet. She looked up, her eyes meeting his without surprise. There was no expectation in her gaze, only openness. "Thank you," was what he wanted to say, but the words felt thin, inadequate. Gratitude pressed against his ribs, tangled with something raw and unfamiliar. He tried again. He told her that his son had never done that before. The sentence came out quieter than he expected, vulnerable in a way his voice had not been in years. He did not explain. He did not apologize. He did not offer money. He simply let the truth stand between them. Violet listened without interrupting. She did not deflect the weight of his words or try to soften them. She nodded once, slowly, as if acknowledging something already understood. She told him that Noah did not need to be fixed. Her voice was gentle but certain. She said he only needed space to feel safe, to feel seen. The simplicity of it struck Miles harder than any expert report ever had. For a moment, they stood in silence. Not the heavy silence Miles was used to. This one felt grounded, shared. He asked her how she knew what to do. Violet smiled then, not wide, not performative, just real. She said she had learned to listen to what people were not saying. She said children spoke in more ways than words. She did not offer herself as exceptional. She spoke as if kindness were a practice rather than a gift. Miles felt curiosity bloom where grief had lived. He noticed the steadiness in her posture, the ease with which she held her own. She was not impressed by him. She was not intimidated either. It was unsettling and grounding all at once. Their conversation ended as naturally as it began. There were no promises, no exchanged numbers, just a quiet understanding that something meaningful had passed between them. Miles' return to his table changed. He watched Violet move through the room again, her presence unchanged even as his world tilted on its axis. He realized then that there were moments no amount of money could purchase. They arrived only when someone chose to see another human being fully. And for the first time in years, Miles Williams allowed himself to wonder what might happen if he stopped trying to buy his way out of pain and instead learned how to meet it. Miles returned 3 nights later and the night after that. He kept the same table by the window, but the reason he came had shifted. The food tasted the same. The room glowed the same. Yet everything felt newly alive, as if a door had been left open somewhere inside him. Violet noticed his return without reacting to it. She did not smile wider or move faster. She greeted him with the same calm presence she gave every table. That steadiness drew him in more than any charm could have. Miles realized he had grown used to people adjusting themselves around him. Violet did not. Their conversations unfolded slowly, like something fragile being unwrapped with care. At first, they spoke of small things, the weather, the city, the way the light changed through the windows as evening fell. Miles found himself lingering over words, surprised by how much he wanted her to hear them. Violet asked questions that did not circle his success. She asked how he rested, how he noticed the world, what he feared losing. When he tried to deflect with humor or distance, she met him with quiet honesty. She did not soften her truth to protect his comfort. She spoke with warmth, but never apology. Miles felt something shift in his chest when she did that. He began bringing Noah again. At first, he told himself it was for the routine, for exposure, for progress. But deep down, he knew it was trust. Violet greeted Noah the same way every time, with patience, with respect, with joy that asked nothing in return. Noah responded by relaxing into the space. His body grew looser. His eyes lingered longer. The restaurant became a place where he belonged. Miles watched it happen and let himself breathe. He noticed how Violet never took over. She never performed care. She simply made room for it. When Noah hummed, she matched his rhythm. When he turned inward, she waited without pressure. Miles felt his own guardedness soften as he observed her. He saw what presence looked like when it was not transactional. One evening he admitted that he had built his life around control. The words surprised him as they left his mouth. Violet listened without judgment. She said control was often grief in disguise. She said distance could feel safer than hope until you realized it was also lonelier. Miles did not argue. He felt the truth of it settle into him. He began to share pieces of himself he had kept sealed for years. The loss that had changed him. The fear of failing Noah. The exhaustion of always being the strongest person in the room. Violet did not rush to reassure him. She let his words stand. She held space like it was something sacred. In her presence, Miles learned that strength could look like openness, that power did not have to silence tenderness. He found himself laughing more easily, sitting longer, listening differently. His world expanded without asking him to give anything up. Two lives that had once existed on opposite sides of glass now overlapped in small, meaningful ways. A shared glance, a quiet understanding, a growing awareness that something rare was forming. Miles Williams had spent his life building walls that protected him from pain. Violet Lee did not tear them down. She showed him a door he had forgotten he could open, and once opened, the light refused to stay out. The shift did not arrive loudly. It crept in through pauses, through moments when Miles stayed longer than necessary and left with something unsettled inside him. He began to notice how Violet's presence followed him after he walked out the door, how her voice lingered in the quiet of his car, how the thought of losing that calm unsettled him more than market crashes ever had. And that was when fear found him. It arrived dressed as reason, as caution, as responsibility. Miles told himself the world would not be kind to them. He imagined headlines that would never be written and whispers that already existed in his mind. He thought of Violet's skin in rooms that had never made space for it. He thought of her apron and his suits, her hands clearing tables and his signing contracts worth millions. He told himself the distance was protection. For her, for Noah, for himself. But the truth sat beneath all of it. He was afraid to want something he could not control. Violet felt the change before he named it. She noticed the way his eyes pulled back just slightly when their conversations brushed against intimacy. She noticed the careful way he began to frame his words, as if preparing an exit. She had learned long ago how hesitation sounded in silence. One evening she asked him what he was afraid of losing. Miles did not answer right away. The city moved outside the window. Lights blurred. He spoke eventually. He admitted his fears without naming them directly. Judgment, complication, consequence. He spoke of imbalance as if it were a fact rather than a feeling. He spoke carefully, too carefully. Violet listened. Then she straightened. She told him she would not be made smaller to fit inside his fear. Her voice was steady, not sharp, but unyielding. She said she had spent her life navigating rooms that questioned her worth. She would not do it again in the name of love. She said love did not ask people to hide. It asked them to show up fully and accept the cost. Miles felt the words land hard. She reminded him that protection could become a cage if fear was the one holding the key. She said courage was not the absence of risk, but the decision to step forward anyway. She did not accuse him. She did not beg. She stood in her truth and let him meet it or walk away. For the first time, Miles understood that his power had limits. He could not manage his way through this. He could not buy certainty. He had to choose. He thought of Noah, of the way his son had stepped into that dance without knowing how it would end, of the joy that had followed when fear had loosened its grip. He realized then that he had been willing to risk the world for his son, but not yet for himself. The realization hurt. Violet watched him carefully. She did not soften. She did not retreat. She waited. Miles felt old wounds stir. The loss that had taught him to equate love with pain. The lesson that closeness ended in absence. He had built an empire to outrun that truth. Now it stood in front of him in the form of a woman who refused to disappear. He reached for her hand, not to hold, just to touch, to acknowledge the weight of what she had said. His voice was quiet when he told her he did not know how to be brave without armor. Violet told him armor was heavy. She told him he did not have to remove it all at once, but he could not ask her to carry it for him. The space between them held the test of everything that followed. Love had exposed the wound. Now Miles had to decide whether he would finally let it heal or continue to guard it until nothing remained. Miles did not wake up changed. He woke up tired of hiding. The decision formed quietly in him over days and nights that felt heavier than usual. He began to notice how often he edited himself, how often he measured love against perception, how often he confused protection with control. Society had taught him that wealth was armor and distance was dignity, that power required separation, that intimacy was something to manage rather than feel. He had learned those lessons well. Unlearning them hurt. The first time he brought Violet into one of his worlds, it was a charity gala held in a room full of glass and sharp edges. Men in dark suits spoke in polished sentences. Women smiled with precision. Violet entered beside him, wearing a simple dress that moved with her body instead of restricting it. Her presence shifted the room. Not loudly, but unmistakably. Eyes followed her, some curious, some dismissive, some calculating. Miles felt the familiar tightening in his chest and chose not to respond to it. He did not adjust his pace. He did not step ahead of her. He did not apologize with his posture. He stood beside her and stayed there. Introductions followed. Some hands lingered too long. Some smiles failed to land. Violet met each moment with calm certainty. She did not perform gratitude. She did not over-explain. She existed fully and expected the room to do the same. Miles watched her and felt something loosen. He began bringing her everywhere, to meetings where people spoke in numbers and forgot the human cost behind them, to dinners where silence had once felt safer than truth. Violet did not shrink in those spaces. She did not seek approval. She listened. She spoke when it mattered. She asked questions that disrupted comfort without seeking permission. And Noah flourished. In Violet's presence, his world expanded. He smiled more easily. He reached out more often. His laughter became something that arrived without coaxing. People noticed, not the way they used to with pity or distance. They noticed because joy is undeniable when it is real. Miles noticed himself changing too. He laughed now, softly at first, then freely. He caught himself telling stories he had buried years ago. He found his hands resting easily on Violet's back instead of hovering uncertainly. He allowed himself to be seen in moments that did not require strength. He realized how often he had mistaken detachment for composure. The spaces that once demanded performance began to bend around him. Not because he commanded them to, but because he no longer needed their approval. He saw how many people had learned the same lesson he once had. That wealth excused absence. That influence replaced intimacy. He chose differently. There were consequences. There always were. Invitations quietly stopped arriving. Conversations cooled. Assumptions sharpened. Miles did not correct them. He did not need to. Violet never asked him to choose her over the world. She asked him to choose truth over fear. He did. Standing beside her publicly felt like stepping into light after years underground. Exposed. Vulnerable. Alive. Miles Williams had built an empire by separating himself from others. Now he was dismantling it quietly by letting someone stand with him. For the first time since grief had hollowed him out, he felt full. Not because he owned more, but because he finally allowed himself to belong. Miles had once believed love arrived as a rescue, a hand pulling you from deep water, a force strong enough to undo what had already been lost. It took time for him to understand that what Violet offered was not salvation. It was recognition. The realization came quietly one evening in the stillness of his home. Noah sat on the floor, lining up his blocks with careful attention. Violet rested nearby, reading without speaking, her presence woven into the room like light through an open window. Nothing extraordinary was happening, and yet Miles felt something settle inside him that had not known rest in years. This was what home felt like. Violet had not changed Noah. She had reminded him that his voice existed in more forms than words. She had not unlocked him. She had listened, and Noah responded because he was always capable of responding. Miles saw now how deeply he had underestimated his own son by believing joy needed to be engineered. And Violet had not softened Miles by force. She had not healed him through effort or sacrifice. She had simply refused to meet him behind walls. She stood in the open and waited for him to decide whether he would join her there. He had. Miles learned that vulnerability did not weaken him. It steadied him. It allowed him to stop performing strength and start practicing presence. He learned that love was not something to manage or ration. It was something to participate in, to show up for without guarantees. He had spent years confusing control with care. Now he saw how tightly he had gripped the world in order to keep it from leaving him. Letting go felt terrifying. Letting go also felt like breathing again. Violet noticed the shift before Miles named it. She felt the way his touch changed. Less hesitant, more assured, not possessive, not protective. Simply there. She felt the way his listening deepened. How he no longer rushed to fix or frame or soften truths. He let moments stand as they were. In that space, Violet allowed herself to receive. She had learned long ago how to give, how to offer warmth without asking for much in return, how to be steady in rooms that never intended to hold her. Loving Miles required a different kind of courage. It required her to stop proving, to stop explaining, to trust that she did not need to earn tenderness through patience or grace. She let him love her without shrinking herself. They met each other without hierarchy, without rescue narratives, without debt. What grew between them was not built on gratitude or obligation, it was built on recognition. Two people choosing to see one another fully and remain. Noah thrived in that balance. He moved through the world with more ease. His laughter came more often. His trust widened. He felt the difference before anyone could explain it. Children always did. Miles watched his son and understood something fundamental. Humanity had never left them. It had simply been waiting for permission to come home. And Violet knew that love did not require her to disappear into someone else's life. It asked her to expand within her own. They were not fixing each other. They were remembering how to sit in silence without fear, how to let joy arrive unannounced, how to choose one another without negotiation. In a world that often demanded distance and dominance, they built something quieter and stronger. They built equality. And in that space, humanity did not need to be taught. It simply returned. The music was barely audible this time, a soft melody drifting through the room like a memory that refused to fade. It played from a small speaker tucked on a shelf near the window, not designed to impress or command attention, just enough to be felt. The late afternoon light spilled across the floor in long golden stretches, warming the walls and settling gently on the three of them. Noah stood near the center of the room, his feet planted unevenly, his body swaying in that familiar rhythm he had made his own. His hands moved through the air as if tracing something only he could see. The world felt safe enough now for him to occupy it fully. There was no audience, no pressure, only presence. Violet sat cross-legged on the rug, watching with quiet joy. Her smile was unguarded, free, the kind of smile that arrives when nothing needs to be proven. She did not guide Noah. She did not interrupt. She allowed the moment to unfold on its own terms. Miles lingered near the doorway, unsure for a beat where he belonged in this small, sacred space. He had learned that hesitation well, but today he stepped forward, slowly, awkwardly. His movements were not practiced or graceful. They did not need to be. He joined his son. Miles swayed in time with the music, shoulders stiff at first, unsure how to let go. Noah glanced toward him, eyes bright with recognition. There was no confusion, no retreat, just acceptance. The rhythm connected them without asking for explanation. Miles felt something settle into place inside him. He thought of boardrooms filled with applause, of deals closed and headlines printed, of rooms where power echoed off polished surfaces. None of it had prepared him for this, for the simplicity of standing beside his child and moving together without agenda, without outcome. Violet watched them and felt the fullness of it rise in her chest. She had seen transformation before. People changed all the time, but this was different. This was return. A man stepping back into himself, a child standing freely in his own body, a family built not on rescue or sacrifice, but on presence. Miles laughed softly when his timing fell off. The sound surprised him. It felt unforced, earned. Noah laughed too, a bright sound that filled the room and lingered there. Violet joined them, the three of them swaying together now. No choreography, no perfection, just life moving as it was meant to. Outside the window, the world continued. Cars passed, phones rang. Somewhere a meeting began and another ended. None of it reached them. The music faded and they stayed where they were. No one rushed to replace the sound. Silence settled around them, warm and unafraid. Miles looked at Violet and knew that everything he had once believed about success had been incomplete. Wealth had given him access. Love had given him belonging. Violet met his gaze with understanding. She had not changed her pace or her truth to be here. She had simply stood in it and invited him to join. This life was not something she had entered quietly. It was something she had claimed. Noah leaned into both of them, his weight steady and trusting. Miles rested his hand on his son's back. Violet's hand found Noah's shoulder. 3 points of connection. Solid. Real. This was the dance that became a life. Not dramatic, not extraordinary to anyone else, but everything to them. And in that ordinary room filled with soft light and quiet music, humanity did not make an entrance. It simply stayed. Before you go, think of the woman who has been overlooked one too many times. This story is her reminder that being unseen never means being unworthy. Share it for her. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.